You should have gone instead of Dad." Those words echoed in Linda's mind, sharper than any wound she'd ever known. Spoken coldly by Emma, her youngest daughter, the very person she trusted to stand by her side, this was the kind of sentence that could shatter a heart already bruised by grief. Linda stood quietly in the small, sunlit room where a photograph of her late husband rested on the mantelpiece, framed by fresh lilies she had placed moments ago. 4 years had passed since Robert's gentle hands last held hers, since his steady voice faded into silence. Yet some days, the ache of his absence felt as raw as the morning he left. She traced the edge of the silver frame, her fingers trembling. Memories flooded back, how warm and reassuring his touch had been, the comfort in his presence during those long, difficult months battling illness. Linda had thought that with Robert gone, her children, especially Emma, would rally around her. Instead, she found herself navigating a new kind of loneliness, one shadowed by suspicion and betrayal. Emma's voice called from the kitchen, sharp with a hint of impatience. "Mom, did you take your medication this morning?" Linda hesitated. It wasn't just the medication that Emma monitored, it was everything. Bills, bank statements, even phone calls. At first, Linda had welcomed her daughter's involvement during Robert's illness, grateful for the support. But over time, the help had morphed into control. Emma had stepped into a role she never asked for, becoming the gatekeeper of Linda's life. "I did, Emma," she replied softly, not wanting to invite more scrutiny. Linda watched from the doorway as Emma sorted through mail with clinical precision, separating bills into neat piles. Emma was the youngest, the so-called miracle baby born after years of hoping, now 29 and still living at home. The 2 older sons had long since built their own lives, Thomas with his medical practice in Boston, Michael working abroad in engineering. But Emma remained tethered to Linda, increasingly as a caretaker, but also as a controller. The lines between care and control blurred. A flicker of unease had been growing inside Linda. The property tax bill she had asked to see was slipped into Emma's purse without a word. When she gently asked, Emma snapped back, "Why? So you can worry about it? You have enough on your plate, Mom." It was a phrase Linda had heard before, during Robert's cancer battle, when Emma had quietly taken over the family finances, claiming to shield them from stress. But Linda wasn't helpless, just grieving. She was not broken. Yet the sense of losing herself crept in daily. The phone rang unexpectedly that afternoon, a call from the bank that sent a chill down her spine. A woman's voice introduced herself as Diane Fletcher from Bank of America, explaining there was an urgent matter about Linda's accounts. Someone had tried to raise her credit limit without her knowledge, and it was flagged under the bank's senior protection program. Linda's heart sank. She hadn't asked for anything. Diane's gentle questions and the quiet concern in her voice only confirmed Linda's worst fears. Someone close had been misusing her financial trust. That evening, as Linda sat alone with a cup of tea, she felt a strange mixture of sorrow and resolve. She wasn't telling the story to seek sympathy or complain. She was sharing because she knew there were others out there, women like her, silently enduring betrayal and loss. If you're watching this, I invite you to join me. Subscribe, share the story, and tell me where you're watching from in the comments. You are not alone. Because sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones fought in the quiet corners of our own homes. And sometimes reclaiming your life means facing the truth, no matter how painful. Linda's world had slowly unraveled over the course of her husband Robert's long illness. Those 18 months were a blur of hospital visits, sleepless nights, and whispered prayers. Through it all, Emma had stepped in as her mother's steady shadow, helping with medications, organizing appointments, and managing bills. At first, Linda welcomed the support, grateful to lean on her youngest child while her strength waned. Emma took charge of the finances early on, promising to shield her mother from the stress of looming medical bills and insurance claims. "I've got this, Mom," she'd say with a comforting smile, carefully sorting the paperwork and paying bills on time. Linda, exhausted and overwhelmed, trusted Emma implicitly. Robert was ill, and the last thing anyone needed was family friction. But as the months passed and Robert's condition worsened, the role Emma played subtly shifted from helper to gatekeeper. The once collaborative decisions about money and daily life became unilateral. Emma began to insist on handling all communications, and when Linda asked to see a bill or a bank statement, Emma's tone would harden. "You don't need to worry about this," she said one evening, snapping more than once when Linda pressed. "I'm taking care of everything." Linda's heart ached, but she said nothing. She wanted peace, not conflict. She told herself Emma was trying to help, that grief and exhaustion might explain the tension. But deep down, a small voice whispered unease. It wasn't just bills anymore. Emma started borrowing from her mother's accounts, small amounts at first, supposedly to cover unexpected expenses. Linda believed her daughter when she said she'd pay it back, but the amounts grew, the excuses multiplied. The bank's calls were the first sign something was terribly wrong. A voice on the other end gently explained there were suspicious transactions, loans taken out, credit limits raised, withdrawals made, all without Linda's authorization. Linda felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "How could this happen?" she whispered to herself, tears blurring her vision. The truth was more devastating than she imagined. Emma hadn't just borrowed money. She had been systematically draining Linda's accounts for years, quietly building a life funded by her mother's trust and savings. Linda's late husband's life insurance, a safeguard she believed would protect the family, had been siphoned off, the bulk used to purchase a luxury apartment in Manhattan. Emma lived there part-time, renting it out for a steady income, while continuing to live at home with Linda and asking for money as if she were struggling. Linda's heart broke in ways she couldn't explain, grief mingled with betrayal, love entangled with anger. How had the daughter she'd held as a newborn become the woman who would take so much from her? She found herself lost in memories, recalling how, as a teenager, Emma had taken small amounts of money from her purse. They had confronted her then, and Robert had insisted on handling it quietly, to protect her future. Linda wondered if that was the moment the pattern began, a mistake born of misplaced compassion. Now, standing alone in her kitchen, surrounded by unopened bills and documents she barely understood, Linda felt a profound loneliness. Yet even in the depth of her pain, she clung to one truth. She was not broken. This was not a story of defeat. It was a story she needed to share, not to complain or seek pity, but because she knew there were others out there, sitting in silence, needing to hear that they were not alone. "I'm not telling this to complain," she would say quietly to friends who listened, "but because I know someone out there needs to hear this." Linda's journey was only beginning, but the first step had been taken, the painful, necessary awakening to a betrayal she never thought possible. It was the moment she decided to reclaim her life, her dignity, and her voice. Linda knew she couldn't stay silent any longer. The weight of betrayal pressed down on her chest like a stone, and the fear of what she might uncover no longer outweighed the need for truth. With a steady breath, she reached out to professionals, an attorney experienced in elder financial abuse, a meticulous financial investigator, and a compassionate therapist who specialized in family trauma. Together, they became her allies in a battle she never expected to fight. Weeks of careful documentation and gathering evidence led to a pivotal moment, a family meeting. The tension in the air was thick as Linda's two older sons, Thomas and Michael, joined her and Emma in the small living room. It was the first time in years they had all sat in the same room, the ghosts of Robert's memory hovering silently in the background. David, the attorney, opened a thick folder filled with statements, loan documents, and official analyses. One by one, he laid out the evidence: forged signatures on loan applications, unauthorized withdrawals, property records revealing the purchase of a Manhattan apartment, all linked directly to Emma's actions. Emma's face drained of color. Her fingers trembled as she gripped the edge of the armrest, trying to hold on to a composure that was rapidly slipping away. "This isn't what it looks like," Emma began, voice wavering but defensive. "I sacrificed for this family. I was the one who stayed when you all left. I handled everything while you were busy building your lives. I deserve something for that." Linda looked at her daughter, really looked, and for the first time saw past the rehearsed defenses to the raw pain underneath. But she was firm. "This is betrayal, not sacrifice," she said quietly, but with unmistakable resolve. "Taking what isn't yours, forging my name, hiding the truth, it's not love, it's theft." Thomas leaned forward, his doctor's mind cutting through the emotional fog. "The evidence is overwhelming. Forged documents, fraudulent loans, unauthorized financial moves. We can't ignore this." Michael, always the peacemaker, sighed deeply. "Emma, if you cooperate, we can work out a repayment plan under legal supervision. But you need to understand, this has consequences." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but her voice hardened. "You would send your own daughter to court? To prison?" Linda's heart ached, but her voice was steady. I never wanted this, but I also won't let this continue. You have a choice. Follow the supervised repayment or face legal action. It's your decision." Silence hung in the room, thick and heavy. Finally, Emma nodded reluctantly and signed the agreement laid out before her. The terms were clear: court oversight, repayment schedules, and strict financial boundaries to protect Linda moving forward. That night, after the family had gone to bed, Linda sat alone in her quiet kitchen. She felt a strange mixture of sorrow and strength. The confrontation had been painful, but it was also liberating. For the first time in years, she felt the stirrings of control returning to her life. With the support of her new team, Linda began taking back what was hers, not just the money, but her independence and her dignity. She started attending therapy sessions to mend the emotional wounds and slowly learned to manage her finances herself. It was a difficult journey, filled with moments of doubt and exhaustion, but each step forward was a victory. Linda's story was no longer just one of loss and betrayal. It was becoming a story of resilience and renewal. She was reclaiming her life on her own terms, and that, she realized, was the greatest triumph of all. After the storm of confrontation had settled, Linda faced the daunting task of rebuilding her life from the fragments left behind. Selling the family home, a place filled with decades of memories, was one of the hardest decisions she made. The house had once been a sanctuary, a symbol of love and family. But now, downsizing was a necessary step toward reclaiming her independence and peace. With the sale complete, Linda moved into a modest apartment that was entirely her own. For the first time in years, she was responsible for every decision, every bill, and every dollar spent. It was both terrifying and empowering. She enrolled in financial literacy classes designed for seniors, eager to finally understand the numbers and jargon that had once seemed like an indecipherable code. Through patience and persistence, she learned to manage her accounts, balance her budget, and regain control of her finances. To fill her days and reconnect with the world, Linda took on a part-time job at a local bookstore. It was more than just income. It was a source of joy and purpose. Surrounded by stories and community, she found solace and a new sense of belonging. She also began volunteering with groups that supported elderly individuals, many of whom had faced similar challenges. Sharing her experience and listening to others, she discovered a collective strength that transcended individual pain. Through her journey, Linda came to understand some profound truths. She was, first and foremost, a mother who had given everything to her family, but she also learned that sacrifice must never come at the cost of self-respect. Standing up for herself was not selfish. It was necessary. She discovered the power of selective forgiveness. Forgiving didn't mean erasing the hurt or accepting ongoing harm. It was about freeing herself from the chains of bitterness while setting clear boundaries to protect her heart and her future. Recovery after loss is never just about mourning what's gone. It's about restoring trust in others, yes, but most importantly, in oneself. Linda reclaimed not just her finances, but her personal power and dignity. Perhaps most importantly, she proved to herself and those around her that financial independence in later life is not a dream deferred, but an attainable reality. Age, circumstance, and past mistakes do not define the limits of what one can achieve. Linda's words carry a quiet strength born from experience, a reminder that even in our darkest moments, there is a spark waiting to be kindled. She knows firsthand how isolating betrayal and loss can feel, especially when it comes from those we love most. The ache of broken trust can linger, casting long shadows over everyday life. But through her journey, Linda discovered that pain, while inevitable, does not have to define us. She found that healing begins with small, intentional steps, reaching out for support, reclaiming control where it feels lost, and embracing the courage to face uncomfortable truths. It's about allowing yourself to feel the hurt fully without letting it consume your future. For Linda, this meant learning to say no, setting boundaries with those who had wronged her, and slowly rebuilding her sense of self-worth. What she wants others to understand is that no matter how shattered your world seems, there is always a path forward. It might be winding and uncertain, but it leads to renewal, a chance to write a new chapter where your voice is heard, your choices respected, and your life reclaimed on your own terms. If you're walking through a similar storm, remember Linda's story. You are not alone, and brighter days are possible. Sometimes, losing everything is not the end, but the very beginning of a stronger, wiser, and more empowered you. To everyone listening, she offers an invitation. Share your story, connect with others, and remember that together, we can build communities of resilience and healing. If this story touched you, please subscribe to the channel, like, and comment below. Your voice matters, and your story could be the light someone else needs to find their way.